Welcome to the Dreamy CEO Podcast. I'm your host, Vicky Phan, your business and marketing mentor. Join me and the best guest speakers to talk all things business, marketing, and sales, leaning into self-care and lots about being an entrepreneur. So grab a coffee and tune in. Okay, so this is going to be another solo episode with just myself. Hello and welcome back, or welcome to the Dreamy CEO Podcast. This is, I told you it's going to be real and vulnerable and raw, and this is as raw and real as it gets, and you are probably going to walk away listening from this episode knowing me to the core. And the thing is, a lot of people in my personal life don't even know this about me. So I'm very curious of, what comes out. I don't have anything structured or planned for this episode, and just going to really speak from my heart and my experience. Some of you are going to be able to, relate to the core. And then some of you are not going to be able to relate to this episode, and that's okay. The thing is, this is all part of life. Grieving, having loved ones who've passed, it's all part of life. And if this episode helps one person cope, if this episode helps one person feel heard, that in itself, I'm fulfilled for this lifetime, because it is such a struggle. It is a crazy journey having to navigate grief while running a successful business and being an entrepreneur, and even grieving in itself, keeping everything together is insane. And I want to kind of share my story and how I was able to navigate grief while running a successful online business. Now, I thought this was going to go a lot smoother and easier than planned, but I'm just gonna let things flow, not have that picture perfect, idea of how this podcast is going to go. So this episode, we are going to be, talking about grief, navigating grief while running a successful business. Now, a little bit of a backstory. 2 years ago, on I guess this would be around early May, I was, sitting. I felt like I was the highest point of my business ever within my entrepreneurial journey. I had the most amazing community. Everything was booming. I just felt on top of the world. And whilst that was happening, one phone call drastically changed the whole trajectory of my life and my business. And from feeling so on top of the world and my highest self at that time, to literally hitting rock bottom moments later. I received a phone call from my sister. She was crying, and my sister is a bit younger than me. She was crying, and she was saying that, my dad's in the hospital, and the doctor said that he has 6 months to live. And I was just in shock. I didn't know how to react. I was like, 6 months? And so many scenarios were going through my head, and I just immediately just broke down. It's a lot, losing a parent. It's a lot also losing a parent so young. I was 20 years old. So this was 2 years ago. I just turned 20, and it was such a weird, interesting feeling. So we got off the phone, and I was just kind of so many things were going through my head. And this was like during COVID. So, you weren't allowed to visit hospitals. You weren't allowed to be a guest. You weren't allowed to visit. And if you needed to drop anything off, you had to do it through like this mobile, and the nurses or whoever was working in the facility were able to pass it on. So I remembered like as soon as we could, we were of course FaceTiming and such, but I think he just didn't want us to see him like that, and it was just a lot in that moment. And um yeah, so then we got more phone calls as time goes on, checking in on him. And a from a predicted 6 months left to live, a week later, he was not doing well. And we had to go and say goodbye. They were flexible with the rules and such because we were just so young. And we were all able to like say goodbye and, stay with him. And we were all in like hazmat suits, like all geared up, mask, gloves, everything. And the thing is, like, everything came crashing down. Like, my world came crashing down. Um, and shortly after he passed, I literally put my head into work. Like, I just like put everything into my business and slowly self-destructing at the same time. And it was it was a lot, right? To have to go through this, and I didn't talk about it. I struggled to talk about it. And again, like, grief is different for everyone. Everyone handles grief differently. And for me personally, I've been I'm an emotional person, but it just builds up. Like, I'm not someone who's overly emotional when things happen. So it was really interesting feeling all of these things, but not being able to kind of like actually deal with them. So again, like, my business was booming. I hit, my highest income month ever at that time. A little bit over a year in my business. My I had a video that hit 1.3 million, and then like millions, not millions, but like hundreds of inquiries coming in, and I just had so much overwhelm, and it was such a struggle in that way. Um but yeah, I really just like pushed it and did everything that I could to distract myself from what was my life in that moment. So my dad just passing away, and, leaving my mom. My brother was still in school. My sister was going off to university. And, I was living with my boyfriend at the time. And in, hopes of being able to support my mom, I started, renovating my childhood home's basement just for me to kind of like, um, stay there while supporting her. And keep in mind, my mom and my dad were entrepreneurs as well. So my mom was, you know, running a business as well while navigating grief. And it's it's a lot. It's tough, and being able to kind of like see her do the same of like not being able to deal or kind of like self-destructing that way, putting all of her energy and time into her business, into her restaurant. It's it's a lot to deal with, and like I felt like we were both struggling in that way in different ways. For me personally, I learned so much from my dad as an entrepreneur. Um, to be honest, he was the first person I've not told, but kind of put the idea out there that I didn't want to be in school and I wanted to be an entrepreneur and do something in the online space and have a community in that way. And I remember um, it was during kind of like Christmas break, and we were on our way to go get sushi. And I was in the car and I was telling him, like, how would you feel if I finished my first year and during summer break, I just kind of like create an online business and kind of in that way. And, deep down, I think he was just like, school is important because, of course, like, educating yourself and growing in that way is important. But I think low key, he kind of gave me that permission to do what I loved and to step forward into creating a life that I wanted. And it just kind of like, it was just a thought. And this was like months before I actually even started my business. Um, but yeah, it was crazy because even when I like came up with an idea of like, oh, I want to be a speech language pathologist, my dad, the first thing he said was like, will you own your own practice one day? Is this what you want to do? Do you want to own your own practice one day? So even conversations were always around like entrepreneurship because he just understood. We were just kind of on the same wavelength with those things. And of course, like, I am my father's daughter. So, we were able to connect in that way. And I learned so much from him. He just growing up, I was sat in, his business meetings. I was, you know, um, interacting with customers all the time. And I was able to kind of grow those skills, those morals and the values of what being an ethical, out of your way entrepreneur with your clients, customers, but also as, a boss, quote unquote boss, um, with your team members and, your employees and, who works with you. So I was able to really learn a lot from him. And, before he passed, I was, again, like I said, at an all-time high with my business. I felt so successful and he was so proud of me. I was telling him, all the things that I was doing, all the things that I was creating, all the people that I was like connecting with, and he was so, so proud of me. Um, there was no faking it. And there were moments in my life where I've interacted with him and I've actually felt like genuine, like, yes, he's so proud of me in this moment. Again, like, my parents are like Asian immigrants, so they've never actually like communicated much in that way, like vocalized, like sat down and was like, I'm so proud of you. But to be fair, um, they were proud and I could feel that. And the way our conversations went, it wasn't like much worry about me. So when he passed, I felt like a part of me was kind of missing in the sense of like, of course, I was doing it for myself because, I'm so passionate about my business, my clients, I support this community, this industry. I'm so passionate and I'm so in this. But also, part of me was like, I want to make my parents proud. I want to do this for them. I want to be able to support them when they're older. And when he passed, a huge chunk of me kind of went with him because, it felt like, who am I doing this for now? Like, I felt like my first ever mentor wasn't there anymore. And I just felt so lost in that moment. But that is part of navigating grief as an entrepreneur. And the thing is, like, you can't change these things, but you can change and be your best self so you can hold on to your sanity um and feel the things that you need to feel and deal the way that you deal. So, looking back, I wish I talked about it more. I made a post, but I just kind of like put my head into my business so much where, I was talking about it, but like instantly relating it back to business kind of thing. Okay, like let's keep going, let's keep the wheel turning. And that was not healthy. That was not a healthy way to cope at all. Um, but it is what it is, and that's how I coped, and that's how I dealt with it. And looking back, I do not recommend that. I recommend, feeling what you need to feel, vocalizing that, and if you need to take a break, take that break. Because like even if I did not take any days off, I just put my head into my business over and over again. I didn't take one day off to just like sit and just like feel everything, to understand it deeper. And all of these things that I'm diving into now, this is 2 years later, and I'm finally able to talk about it. I have not, like a year ago, I would not be able to talk about it the way I talk about it now. So healing and grieving takes time. Everything takes time. And, you know, it doesn't get easier because you are always, learning more about yourself and reflecting on your relationship with your loved one. But the thing is, like, as time goes on, you are able to understand it a little bit better. You're able to navigate it a little bit better, and you're able to cope better than you did from day one. And that's, of course, a given. But if you are struggling with this right now, I just want you to know that it does get better. And you are going to realize a lot about yourself. You're going to realize a lot about your relationship with them. And, it gets better. It does. And now, like, whenever before I didn't really celebrate my wins as I should have. And it just kind of was like, what's the next thing and such. And now I'm able to take a moment to celebrate it. Like, look up, like, Dad, I did this. Grieving is so unique to everyone. And you can read the pamphlets, you can read these books, you can listen to advice, but the best thing I think you can do while grieving is to deal. And what I mean by deal is just to really take some time to take it all in and understand it, because you can't change it, and it's so out of, your hands.
Thank you for tuning in to the Dreamy CEO Podcast. I'm your host, Vicky Phan, and I've loved sharing my journey and the stories of other amazing women entrepreneurs with you. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep thriving as that entrepreneur, my friend.